This is Mujib from North Country Kettlebells. Today I'm going to take a moment and talk about a few kettlebell training red flags and some of the fixes that we can apply to those red flags once we recognize them. Now when it comes to kettlebell training, the first things that come to my mind are grace, composure, fluidity, and consistency. In my experience, kettlebell training has been one of the hardest and most impactful weightlifting practices that I've ever engaged with. Whether it's trying to move a 70-pound kettlebell a number of times, or to swing a 90-pound kettlebell, or even just to get comfortable with something like a 40 or a 50-pound kettlebell, kettlebell training proves that there is a lot of things to be paying attention to during every rep, during every set, and during every workout. This video aims to point out a few safeties and hazards that we want to consider when approaching a progressive kettlebell training practice. So now let's take a moment and talk about a few kettlebell training red flags and some easy fixes for getting past them. So when I stop to think about kettlebell training red flags and fixes, the first red flag that comes to my mind is any movement that lacks grace, composure, fluidity, and consistency. And that's going to be a fairly short list at that. Now, this could have to do with the way that one rep looks to the next. This could be the way that one movement looks to the next. This could also be the way that one weight looks to the next, right? So if I'm doing a push press with a 16 kilogram or 35 pound kettlebell and it already looks kind of shaky, and then I go up to a 45 pound kettlebell and it looks even more shaky, and then I go to a 55 pound kettlebell and it just kind of looks reckless or dangerous or ugly, then that's going to be my red flag that I'm going to want to step back down and fix as soon as I can. Now here's where I want to talk about the idea of shades of red within this red flag reality, meaning that my immediate fix, my thing that's going to potentially hurt me if I move up in weight or go for a little bit too long or do a few more extra repetitions, that immediate fix I could think of as like a very, very deep red flag, right? Something that just has to be a hard stop and let's work on this before we go any farther, right? Whereas a light red flag might just mean something that's going to be an easy fix or is going to work itself out over time. And so if we talk about the idea of a movement lacking grace and we apply that to a beginner, well then, as long as you think that your movement is supposed to look better as you go on, and that as you get up in weight and as you go farther with experience, your movement is going to get smoother, it's going to get more graceful, well then we're going to refer to that as a light red flag, and that light red flag is going to be fixed with some simple technical aspect or some simple practice and progression. And so again, that light red flag might just mean something with a routine fix. But if the set that I'm doing is just getting sloppier and sloppier as I go, or if as I go up in weight, my form gets sloppier and sloppier, or if anything within my movement starts to lose grace as it goes on or lacks grace as a whole, I might not really consider that a light red flag, because I want to remember that none of my sets should ever fall apart. And so if that's a regular occurrence, meaning like every time that I lift this weight, I go until my movements look completely ugly, then for me as a trainer and as a trainee, that's going to be a very bright red flag. In general, we want to think that as a rule, in all forms of weightlifting, as we get heavier with the weights that we're using, as we start to get more intense with the workouts that we're doing, anything that's going to increase the amount of work that we're doing or is going to bring us into that realm of advanced lifter, those movements are going to look generally graceful, fluid, and composed, and definitely consistent when it comes to my training progressions. We want to think that a general characteristic of gaining advancement is that we're making hard things look easier and easier to do. This is really because as we reach these heights, the things that we're focusing on have more to do with proper alignment, proper engagement, and other more meditative aspects of the training practice, and less to do with just trying to fight this weight to go up or off the ground. Now that leads me into my next red flag, which is going to be basically if the work that I'm doing is not teaching me something about how to do it better, then I'm going to have to take a look at the goals and the purpose and the execution of my practice. especially when it comes to kettlebell training. So what I mean by that is that every time that I move the kettlebell, even now at this advanced stage at which I'm approaching my kettlebell training practice, I want each lift, I want each movement, I want each set to be giving me some level of information that should be letting me know how to do this thing better, or at least letting me know exactly where I'm at right now. For me, I think about my progressive kettlebell practice as a book that's being written as I go, and not a single page that's being printed and reprinted again and again. It's as if every single rep adds to the story. And in this way, every movement has an opportunity to be a conversation between me and the kettlebell. And that conversation is going to pertain to my progression, to how I'm responding to the practice, and to how much the practice is integrating into my everyday life. Every session is also going to provide an opportunity for recognition and appreciation for the work that I'm doing. Which brings me to my next red flag, which is going to be if the practice is not mentally and physically engaging. Now, there are no shortages of movements and variations that we can do with the kettlebell, and all of those movements and variations require at least most of our attention. And so if what we're doing isn't getting us excited and isn't helping us keep our focus on the practice, then perhaps there's just something that's missing, like a few key elements that would be otherwise keeping my attention and getting me excited about my progression. Oftentimes when it comes to kettlebell training, it has to do with core muscle engagement, but it could also have to do with the alignment, to other aspects of structural stability, to hand placement and other aspects of where the kettlebell ends up in position during my technique. Does it end up slightly in front of me or slightly behind me? Or is my alignment stacked properly so that that movement feels more and more secure each time that I do it? Basically, the best way to see it is that if I'm always learning from my practice, then I'm always taking away something from that practice that is going to keep me engaged and excited about the practice. Basically, the idea is if that practice is teaching me more and I'm learning more every time that I step into the practice, then it's probably going to feel more and more engaging every single time that I interact with it. But if this is not the case, then maybe kettlebell training isn't really supposed to be your primary strength training exercise practice. And that's just reality. The truth of it is that there's nothing within the kettlebell training practice or within the realm of kettlebell training that's gonna match a very heavy leg press or deadlift. And if those are the movements that scratch your itch, then you're just gonna have to go with those and maybe find some ways that the kettlebell training practice might help you with mobility or with conditioning or with other aspects of your overall physical experience. So there you have our last red flag. If the kettlebell training practice doesn't poke your passions and get you jazzed up, then perhaps there's a more effective alternative for you out there. If so, I suggest that you find that and follow this simple formula, and you'll get to wherever it is that you want to go, and you'll enjoy the entire process of getting there. You can always visit northcountrykettlebells.com to learn a little bit more about kettlebell training and how to apply some of these easy techniques to your fitness training practice. You can follow me on Instagram at @NCKettlebells and on Facebook, North Country Kettlebells. And you can always find more training videos on YouTube and Vimeo by searching North Country Kettlebells. As always, this is Mujib from North Country Kettlebells talking about some kettlebell training red flags and some easy fixes to get you past them. Enjoy.